Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a wine from Hawke's Bay on the east coast of New Zealand's North Island. The wine is a Merlot. It's from the Redstone Vineyard. It's made by Church Road and it's from their 1 series. This is the 2021 vintage of that. Church Road, one of the older wineries in Hawke's Bay, was founded in 1897 and completely tied up with the history of Church Road, or Taradale as it originally was, is a young man by the name of Tom McDonald. McDonald joined the winery at the age of 14 in 1921 and was involved there in various roles, at one stage owner, other stages manager, up until his death in 1987. McDonald managed the estate for the McWilliams family, Australian winemakers who owned it for a long period, and the Cabernet Sauvignons he made here in the 1950s and 60s are really legendary. They're probably some of the first truly consistently age-worthy wines being made in New Zealand. And for that reason, McDonald has a huge place in the history of Hawke's Bay. Thus, the premium range that the Church Road make is the Tom McDonald range. Now, the 1 range, which this is part of, sort of sits just below that. And in fact, the wines are made in more or less the same way. And it's really a final selection of what are the best wines that will go into the blend for the Tom McDonald wines. And then the rest of the wines that are picked for their typicity in depicting the vineyard and the variety, in this case the Redstone Vineyard in the Bridgepart Triangle, and the variety obviously Merlot. Quality of the viticulture involved doesn't vary according to whether the wine is going to the 1 series or the Tom McDonald wine, because obviously up until the stage of selection many of the wines could go into either. There's very careful shoot thinning, bunch thinning, declumping, trimming of the canopy to make sure there's not too much vegetation, and then in the final stages of ripening, picking of leaves from the fruit zone, so that all with the aim of giving the fruit regular spacing throughout the row and making sure it's well exposed to the sun. 2021 was a lovely warm dry vintage, so there was no pressure from rot or fungal infection. In fact, the issue was making sure that the vines had sufficient water to stay active, but not so much that they became vigorous, and thus careful monitoring using moisture probes and the use of dripper irrigation for limited deficit irrigation was applied. Some very careful monitoring went on in the run up to picking as well. The grapes were being analysed every 2 to 3 days, and the aim was to pick the wines when they still had sort of lovely freshness and vivacity within the fruit, but yet also that there was power, richness and concentration there. The fruit was hand-picked, it was carefully sorted. On arrival at the winery it was destemmed, crushed, the must was inoculated, and fermentation went ahead immediately. Fermentation in tank was allowed to go up to about 34 degrees Celsius, and that's a relatively warm fermentation, and the aim there was to extract colour and to extract ripe tannins, and that's what this selection of temperature enabled. After fermentation, the skins and the pips were allowed to continue macerating to give a total period of maceration of about 3 to 4 weeks. The exact time of draining was determined very much by tasting, and throughout this period aeration was allowed, and the aeration helped to fix colour, to stabilise the tannins, and to give lovely lifted aromas. At the stage that was determined correct, the completed wine was run off into French oak barriques. These were Burgundy barriques, 228 litre barrels. This was close-grained French oak, and 43% of it was new. So there's a reasonable amount of oak there. Once it was put into barrel, the wine would either undergo or complete its malolactic conversion, and the wine aged in these barrels for 19 months. The first 8 months aging went on with the lees still in there to give richness, to help feed the wine and give it a roundness and a concentration. And after 8 months, the wine was racked, returned to barrel, and stayed for a further 11 months in barrel. When it came to bottling, the wine was bottled unfined, unfiltered, and without cold stabilisation. All approaches adopted to try and make sure that as much of the fruit character and perfume stayed in the wine, wasn't diminished. So let's have a look at the wine, shall we? Looking at it, to begin with, it's deep, it's dark, it's virtually opaque. I can just about see the stem through the glass as I look down through the wine. As I'm swirling it, the wine has 14.5% alcohol. It has plentiful tannins, and you can see tears forming, not surprisingly, on the side of the glass quite readily. The colour, as I say, deep dark. It's black red, more red than purple actually. It's holding its colour well to the rim. There's very little colour loss at the edge. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? That is beautifully fresh and plummy. There really is a sort of ripeness there. There's a top note of ripe red cherries, a sort of a slightly more bright note there, but those aromas are lovely lifted red fruit perfumes. So to taste. On the palate, that has a smooth, rounded texture. There are cedary notes, and there is a very slight sort of drying grip. But generally, the wine is opulent. It's got that 14.5% alcohol. It's adding a roundness to the back palate. It's juicy. It's that dark plum, damson, black cherry, all those notes coming through there. It's very juicy, it's fat. The wine is full-bodied. The lovely sort of sweet spice note at the back palate. There's cinnamon, ginger, those sorts of hints behind the ripe fruit. But it's always returning to that ripe fruit. At the finish, there's this sort of rich, juicy black plum and black cherry fruit that's enduring really well. I would guess that ideally you'd leave this wine for 4 or 5 years before drinking it, and it should be well capable of aging for at least 10 years. You've got plenty of concentration in there. There is actually a balanced freshness. The juiciness that I'm talking about in the fruit is showing that, although the acidity is not particularly standing out. It's certainly there and giving balance to the wine. The alcohol seems reasonably in balance with the rich fruit. As I say, it's a little warming and rounded, but it's not out of whack particularly. I'm actually quite pleased with how approachable this is now, but as I say, ideally I'd leave it for a few years before drinking it. But this is a wine that I think is impressive for its concentration, its balance, the way it's been beautifully put together. This is a very high quality wine, and I think it really shows what the best areas of Hawke's Bay can do in a good ripe year with Bordelais varieties such as Merlot. It perhaps doesn't have the length and structure of the Tom McDonald Cabernet Merlot, where the Cabernet adds that extra element to the wine. But this is a really enjoyable wine, and considering that this is not quite, but almost half the price of the Tom McDonald wine, it's not a bad buy at all. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you find the tasting of interest. If you've enjoyed it, do please press the like button. Do please think about sharing it with your friends. Do sign up and follow us on YouTube. That would be fantastic. Leave your comments in the box below. We'd love to hear what you think of the tasting, of the wines, or anything else related to it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you'll be able to join us for another tasting on YouTube very soon. Bye now.